Quick heads up, Gooroo sent me this controller, but they didn't pay me to say anything specific. All opinions and views are my own, hence why you'll see me have a little trouble with it later on. So here is the Ableton project that I'm going to be controlling with the LIOBOX, and it's, yeah, full 2 hours, completely marked up, MIDI clicks, everything you could want in an Ableton project. Now what's interesting is, as you can see, it's already marked up to AbleSet. So I've got every song, I've got everything that we need, I've got all of the control, but what I want to do is remove this element and just use the LIOBOX. That's the goal, because having this next to my kit rather than a full laptop is really nice. Now what's really interesting is, as you can see, none of the songs are on here, and this is a really interesting thing that they have to deal with at Gooroo for the LIOBOX and different controllers and things like that, where every marker here on Ableton, as you can see, there's loads of them, and there's probably a little over 120 in there, and because of that, that means that it can't send out all of that information to the LIOBOX. The great thing about them being in such a small company is that they're working on it. So what I now need to do is I need to essentially remove most of these markers and replace it with a MIDI clip that has intro, verse, chorus, because then AbleSet can see the MIDI clip and I have individual control over all of the sections, and then the LIOBOX can see each song and tell me the information that I need. So the goal for me then is, when I'm on stage, is to have the LIOBOX controlling everything. So this will be my play, stop, go to next. This is how I'll do things. AbleSet will be on my iPad, but just for emergencies, because then I have control over like the verse, chorus, individual control, up until the point they update it that Ableton can send all that information through. And then I'm also going to do something ridiculous, which you should definitely not do, but I'm going to replace my SPDSX and send MIDI out of the LIOBOX. And it's gonna be stupid, but I'm really excited to do it, but don't do it. But it's gonna be great. Anyway, my job now is to replace all of these markers with MIDI, and then, yeah, I'll check back in when I've got all my songs ready on the LIOBOX. So, there's been some interesting developments as I have made this project. Yeah, so I mentioned using it with AbleSet and the LIOBOX, but because of the naming conventions between the two softwares, it doesn't quite work. So check this out. So we've got everything working, and I've been deep in the documentation, which isn't the clearest thing in the world, I'll be totally honest, but I'll get to that in a second. So yeah, everything's there and everything's labeled. So if we take a song name, you have to put in all of these little details as well, so that they appear, obviously there's a difference. Oh, is it? That is the same song. So that they appear here. Pretty cool. And then obviously if you hit play, countdown starts, stuff like that. So that, really, really cool. But it means that when using AbleSet, obviously it replicates all of this. So it just makes AbleSet look pretty messy, especially if you go into Performer View. Like, it's handy to have that information there, but when I know that it can be in these lovely, beautiful squares, yeah, just a little thing there. One other thing that is a hair annoying. So where you have to input the time, so let's go this track, let's hit play on the LIOBOX. So where you have the time for it, just here, and it counts it down. You have to input that, which is a little bit annoying, because if you say, if I click through to, let's go chorus 2 and then hit play, problem is then that time doesn't change. The time then stays to the total. It doesn't then like click down to wherever the time is there. So it would be lovely if that could be read from Ableton. That would be really nice. The only last thing I had trouble with is some of our songs start with a loop. So this one, as you can see, I've got AbleSet, and this is why I'm still using AbleSet and why I didn't fully commit to the LIOBOX. It automatically puts a loop marker around it, and then I can jump to the next track whenever the singer is ready. The problem is I couldn't get the loop to work. So in the documentation, it says add this loop and then however many beats. So I put loop 8 because it's 8 beats, and it just wouldn't. And I don't know if it's because it has the song title on it, but I removed that marker and just put loop, and it just wasn't doing it. So that was really interesting. But to be fair, for that sort of thing, reading documentation, it sounds like an Ableton problem rather than a LIOBOX problem, because in their documentation, they mentioned that Ableton reads that rather than the LIOBOX. So that's just something that's quite interesting. I think the difficulty I'm having is not comparing it to something like AbleSet, because this is AbleSet in a box, or Setlist, or one of any of the other Setlist controllers for Ableton or any software. It's that, but in a box. And that's what I love about it, is that it's a physical hardware version. I don't have a physical hardware version for AbleSet, and that has its drawbacks and its benefits. Exactly the same as this. It's got amazing benefits in the way that now I can see my full set list on a little box rather than a computer or a massive iPad, and I can hide it and I can control everything, but equally it has its drawbacks. But anyway, onto the more fun thing of what I'm going to do next, which is ridiculous and I don't recommend doing it, but I want to because it's going to be great fun. So I generally use this to control Ableton, AbleSet. I've got like play, stop, next, previous, and then these are just triggering Ableton. Pretty good. But on the back of the LIOBOX, there are these little guys, which are MIDI in and out ports. So the plan is to replace the SPDSX with the TM2, but only with one pad. Well, one PDA and a foot switch. I don't know if the foot switch works yet. If it doesn't work, you'll find out in about 10 seconds when I edit in the footage.
Nope, didn't work.
Now, where this gets complicated is that throughout this gig, it's automated. So at some points it's playing clap, at some points it's playing congos and bongos. It's also controlling play and stop, which I'm moving to here, so that's not too bad. But one thing I like to do is press play with the foot switch, so then it looks really subtle, I don't have to press anything. Same with, there's one part when it's looping, when it loops forever, I then hit this next pad when we're ready to go, and then it starts the track. And this is probably one of the only parts in Ableton that I'm relatively nervous about, because my plan is to do a bunch of program changes so then it reflects that.
But the issue is that the TM2 needs to be MIDI out to the Ableton rig and also to the LIOBOX. So therefore I need to go MIDI out of the TM2 into the Focusrite, which will then give me MIDI into Ableton, and then MIDI out of the Focusrite into the LIOBOX. So it's kind of like a weird pass-through, but I'm going to be sending program changes from the LIOBOX straight to the TM2. Yeah, this can only go well. This can only go well. So let's go back and plug this in and see if we can figure that out.
None of that worked. None of it. Zero. None of the things that I just talked about that I just planned worked how it should have. So the big thing being based upon the MIDI in and out of the LIOBOX. I can get an input, can't get an output. I'm currently working with Florian at Gooroo to try and figure this out for me personally. I think it's just an adapter thing on the adapters I have, but either way. So here's how the LIOBOX is now finally set up for this gig. So as you can see, it now has all of the names of all of the songs and all of the tracks on the gig. And if we look at AbleSet, we can see that none of the names have the janky titles with all the other information, and this is purely because I found the setting on the LIOBOX to change the screen to, I think I have it in simple format, but I've just removed the visual of that because I didn't need it. It's nice information to have, but I don't need it. So it's nice that the LIOBOX has that customizability, ability to change how it looks. What I also found is that there's 4 banks of buttons to be able to change. So the 4 buttons on the bottom, you've now got 4 banks of them. So you've technically got 16 buttons to play with. So the first bank is to control everything on the LIOBOX. That's the set list and how it works with itself. The second bank I've changed to all custom MIDI notes, and that's to control AbleSet. And then the third bank is like miscellaneous stuff, where again, they're MIDI notes, but this is where I was talking about having the loop control. This is where I figured it out, where I've essentially just put the first button as a custom MIDI note and then toggled Ableton's loop function with that MIDI note. So I can just go loop on, loop off with the press of a button. And the best bit is that you can name them whatever you want. So I've put it as loop, but if you wanted this as fart, then you can have that as well. The only thing I'd love to be able to do is be able to send a program change to the LIOBOX, so then it automatically changes that bank. You might be able to, I don't know, but that would be great. And this is where I mentioned earlier about the documentation sort of thing. The documentation is good, but not great. So I actually found it quite hard as a musician, rather than a playback tech, to find what I was looking for. So if you're a playback tech, you probably know all of the lingo, you know exactly where everything is. But as a drummer first, I'm still learning that world. There's some things that I don't know. So the documentation is good, but for example, it'll have some Ableton information, say, near the top, but then it'll continue it after it talks about Reaper, Pro Tools, that sort of thing at the bottom. And then equally, where there's some overlap in terms of the world of MIDI, that sort of thing, that will be in the MIDI section, not the Ableton section. And then it's like, does that work with Ableton? Yes, because it's MIDI, but does that work with what I want it to work? And that sort of thing. Similarly to the naming convention. So like I was talking about having the title and the other information, that was actually quite difficult to figure out, because on the documentation, it says it quite clearly what you should name it, but it then doesn't show any examples. I personally feel like the documentation could be a little more detailed detailed in that sense. And there's also a few other videos that Gooroo have made in terms of setting it up with software, but they'll talk about some things in the video that won't be in the documentation, which I think is a little bit of an oversight. I feel like the documentation needs to have everything, and then you make videos from that, but you can find everything in the documentation. I found myself not being able to find something in the documentation and then having to watch a video on it, even though there was no indication that I should go and watch that video. Let's talk about my big TM2 experiment wanting to replace the SPDSX with the TM2. So my original plan was to patch change the TM2 throughout the gig, so have all of the samples built in onto it, and then all of the program changes are being sent through the LIOBOX onto the TM2. Now, where this was exciting is that I have to play conga parts. So I've only got one pad, and yes, I could use up to 4 with the TM2, but I didn't want to. I just wanted to use the one pad. And there's a conga bit where it's high conga, low conga, bat, 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 and so it needs to change every half bar. So what my plan was just to send a program change every half bar to switch patch, so I could get high conga, low conga, high conga, low conga. That all worked, except that the TM2 was too slow and the patch change didn't change quick enough. So what I ended up doing, in Ableton, I've then just got loads of automation. As you can see, that's just a little bit crazy, but it changes every half bar, and it actually worked really, really well. I'm very much considering just replacing the SPDSX with this. Now, the only reason why I used the TM2 as a MIDI controller into Ableton and then sampled it there is just because I didn't have enough outputs on the backing track rig. So I could have absolutely just put the samples on the TM2 and then just outputted it like a normal person, but I didn't have enough outputs for this setup, so we just did it through Ableton. One of my favorite things about this whole setup though is it fits so well into my bag. So it comes with a really nice little carry case that you can buy separately, as well as the mount that you can also buy separately. The bag does come with it though, when you buy it. So that's pretty cool. And all of the cables fit into this box. And so does the LIOBOX, and all of that fits into my backpack, and it doesn't really take up any room at all. And I just love that. So setting up the TM2 and the LIOBOX with the LIOBOX attached to my hi-hat stand felt so much more like efficient and neater and more subtle than having a huge SPDSX next to me. One problem that I did find is that because they're USB-B cables, it meant that I was limited in distance to my laptop. What I'd love to be able to do is put the laptop off stage, it's hidden, people can't see that I'm running Ableton, and then have the LIOBOX just controlling all of that just next to my hi-hats. Unfortunately, the only way around this that I can think of right now is just setting up a little network and using AbleSet on an iPad. But I'd love to see that problem be solved somehow. The LIOBOX was incredibly easy to control throughout the show, which was really nice. All of the buttons feel really solid, so because it's made out of metal and it's mounted really securely, it meant that like pushing all of the buttons just felt really, really good. So yeah, there were no major problems with this whole setup, which was quite nice, and it's a really nice option outside of using something like AbleSet on the kit. And it was really, really satisfying having a physical controller to control the setlist. But should you buy one? The big question for the LIOBOX is, why would I replace AbleSet with this? And the answer is you wouldn't. This is just another option when you're actually choosing what to control your software with. So rather than it just being AbleSet, Setlist, Oaktone, that sort of thing, you've now got Gooroo LIOBOX in that list as well, which is great. It just gives another option to control something. So if you prefer to have hardware over software to control a setlist, this is the thing for you, because it's so satisfying and it does pretty much all of the things that you'd want it to do and a little bit more, which is quite nice. I think Will from Studio to Stage put it perfectly where he said, it's incredibly powerful yet incredibly simple. And it's true. It's so powerful and it's so simple as well. So I tried to make this video as real as I could, where I took you along on the whole journey of implementing a new piece of equipment into a gig that I already run, what that looks like, the things that I ran into, the troubles that I had, the features that it has, and then resulting in what the gig looks like with it. My Patreons get access to my full opinion because I have no filter on the Discord, and I'm just there, I'm just chatting away. So I'm just gonna say it how it is. There's a link down below if you'd like to join in on that. Head to the Gooroo website if you're interested in the LIOBOX and you want some more details. But yeah, that is the LIOBOX.